Hello, i211. So last time we implemented this rock, paper, scissors game. It was a little bit rudimentary, but we were communicating all of our output to the user through these series of print statements. So this time what I want to get practice with is, notice I still have my rock, paper, scissors game right here, and I can choose rock. I can try this again. Maybe I can choose rock or paper or scissors. Ooh. So notice something is happening over here on the left-hand side of my screen, though. Every time I'm typing inside of here, notice that some information is getting stored inside of this other place. And we are going to implement something known as logging, where we can actually record some data inside of our program and output it into a special file. So maybe I'll wrap this up with this, and I can put some additional information inside of a log file as my program executes. So let's start at step one. So in the previous lesson, we cloned our repos from GitHub to our local machine, made a series of commits, and occasionally synced our commits with our GitHub repository. This time, we don't need to clone. So we should just need to cd back into wherever we were working last time, check that we don't have anything to commit, and therefore we're ready to start some work, and just open it up in Visual Studio Code. So let's do all those. I'm going to open up a terminal. Give it a second to load, of course. So step one, where am I? Okay, this is in my i211 directory, so I will cd into there, cd into my Hazel i211 starter. On mine, I have a thing that immediately tells me what my git status is, but I can do the exact same thing, and it tells me that my branch is up to date with origin main, nothing to commit, working tree clean, exactly like we were hoping it would be. So this basically just tells me that I left all of my work in a clean state last time, and I'm ready to open this up in Visual Studio Code and keep working. So code space dot, open that up in Visual Studio Code, move some of my windows around to make it a little bit easier to see. That looks about right, maybe around there. Okay, so new day, new tests. We have a new set of tests for today to help keep track of how we're doing. Let's add these. So add the following tests right here to the top of my test rps.py, just below the import statements. So what is inside of my test rps.py currently? Okay, well, there's a class right here defining those computer choice tests we were doing last time. Maybe this would be a pretty good time just to say that I can do test rps.py, and I still pass all of those tests that I did previously. Let's see, so I want to copy all of these tests just below the import statements. So I'll copy, go here to line number 4, Control V. Control V is going to paste those in. Let's see, that added about 109 lines of, or 100 lines or so of new tests that I want to do. Let's see, So our test should no longer pass, which is a good sign. Yeah, it's a good sign in this case, because if we have non-passing tests, it means that we're ready to start working. Okay, great. So 38 tests. That's a little bit more than the 27 we had last time, and a few errors. Okay, so recommendation now, add, commit, and push my changes. Small comment right here. This does mean that GitHub will contain a broken version of our code. That's going to be okay for this class. Read footnote number 2 if you're curious about some caveats for this explanation, though. Okay, so Control L to clear. Let's do git status, git add, test RPS to the staging area. Do a status one more time to confirm that it has been modified. Go ahead, do git commit -m and say something along the lines of add new tests for this session. Cool. Git status, ahead by 1. I am actually going to do some slightly more frequent pushes in this case. So let's see some examples of that. So if I do github.ie.edu info, i211, or i211 sp2025, here's all i211 starter. There we go. Okay, just to show like what this looks like. Okay, so notice I've got this green check mark at the moment, which represented my previous state. I have non-working code over here, but I am one commit ahead. So let's go ahead and do git push. This is going to update GitHub. If I refresh the page, let's see, didn't do it this time. I was expecting to see the status there. Okay, cool. So pending changes. Okay, and they broke. Okay, so for those of you playing along, and if you want to read this footnote, this isn't usually like the best practice. Like usually there's other ways that we would want to divide up our work so that we're not actually breaking the code that's out here on GitHub. But that's going to be like a little bit more dependent on the teams that you're actually working on. So for the purposes of this class, it is completely okay to push some stuff in and get some practice this way. You can layer on more complexity when you actually do like all your DevOps type stuff in the future. Okay, so that goal we have today, okay, so we want to work on logging or keeping track of a record of the internal state of our app as it runs, and we want to eventually work towards something like these messages. So two subproblems. We need to know the current time, and we need to combine it with a short message. Okay, cool. So the first part can be solved with the Python datetime standard library, where the datetime.now method gives us something of the form year, 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 month, month, day, day, otherwise known as the year, month, day format. Let's try this out now. So this is inside of a Python REPL. Let's just confirm that I can do something like this. So Control Alt clear, Python 3, from datetime import datetime. Okay, and now I have access to this, we'll call it an object. So an object that defines a method called .now, and if I call that method, it's going to show me a little bit more information. So a year, a month, a day. These are all the individual integers of the full component. But notice that if I convert the datetime.now result, so datetime.now, and then I just turn that into a string, then the result is that we get it in this format that's all pretty much exactly what we're actually looking for. Okay, so I think we have like part of this. Next idea. We want to implement this idea as a function. Okay, so make log message. We want to take a string and return a string, and we probably want to end up with something like 2025-02, then a space, then two hyphens, then another space, and then this is probably the message that then we want to pass in. So if we look at our functional examples, make log message trying in the REPL should return something like this. Okay, I have a couple of thoughts. Let's first copy this into my rps.py. Where's a good spot? Let's exit out of that. I'm going to do most of these here at the top. So down here will be my actual RPS implementation. And I think up here I want to have like behind the scenes operations. Sometimes this would be the the application logic versus your business logic, but that's not really the topic for today. Anyway, so make log message. So how do we start implementing this? Well, we probably need this whole like from datetime import datetime. So I'll go ahead and bring that in here as well. And at that point, we should have we should be able to just do this whole make log message. Let's just do like return none for now. This isn't going to be right, but like last time, sometimes something that's not quite right will at least give us the opportunity to step in the correct direction. So what does it look like if I do a couple of these things? So let's add that print statement, maybe add another print statement for this one. Okay, so make log message, trying in the REPL. Okay, so at the moment, if I just do, what's going to happen if I actually try to run rps.py? Let's find out. Okay, so now we get into a problem immediately. We have none, none, and then we immediately start going into trying to play our game of rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so this is not very convenient when I'm trying to write code. Okay, so what do we do about this? Well, we can just do Control-C for now, because, we could just keep executing that way. Like, we could just do Control-C, we could try again, modify a little bit, Control-C again. I'm actually going to do something where I throw an exit command down here on line 13. So what this does is that now it's kind of separated my program into two pieces. There's this thing at the top that I'm actively working on, and then there's all of this stuff here at the bottom that I think is kind of in an okay or some kind of done state. We'll try a couple different variations on this idea for basically the rest of this lab. So now when I just run this code, if I do Python 3 rps.py, it's no longer going to do anything down here because we have this exit command that is immediately just stopping the execution as soon as we hit line 13. So now I can modify this message to do basically whatever I need it to, and as long as I fix this stuff down here at the end, it won't affect my actual implementation. Okay, so This feels like it's pretty close already by simply returning the message, but we're still missing some stuff. What are we missing? It's that whole date time component. So maybe the first thing I need to do is I just get like a stamp representing that datetime.now thing that we mentioned, and maybe we can add some print statements in order to figure out like what is happening as we run this code. So we should have access to the stamp right now, we should have access to the message, and let's just focus on these two things. So Python 3 rps.py, I think what should happen is it should print the current stamp and then the message one line after another. Let's see if that's what happens. Okay, so gives me the time. So it's, as you can see, I'm recording this a little bit late, and it's about 10:30 right now on February 3rd. But okay, so trying in the REPL, and then it's a little bit confusing at the moment that we have this return statement right here. Let me switch that to none. Okay, so kind of ignore these two right here. Imagine those two things are none. Okay, so we have these two pieces, and now we want to somehow combine the message and the timestamp into a single unit. What does that single unit look like? Well, we want it to look something like this. Okay, so let's take the things we have so far. We have a timestamp, we have a message. The only thing we're missing is this stuff in the middle and maybe some square brackets at the beginning and the end of it. I think we have pretty much everything we need. So what happens if we say like let's say like log message is going to be something like the stamp plus, okay, so we need this thing. Let's kind of build this up piece by piece. So we need a left square bracket, we need the stamp, we need a right square bracket, so that's going to be another string. Then we need this stuff right here. So that's going to be a space, 2 hyphens, and a space. And then we need what? Trying in the REPL, which is just going to be the message. Okay, so we can drop the message in there. Okay, and then return the log message at the end, which you probably don't need any of these print statements anymore. How does this work? Let's see. So I think what should happen is that we are going to get the stamp, we are going to combine the stamp with all this other stuff that we want, and then return it at the end. Let's see if that's what happens. So Control L to clear the screen, Python 3 rps.py. Uh-oh, oh no, what happened? Oh no, well, hold on. Type error can only concatenate string, not datetime.datetime to string. Deep breath. Let's read our error message and see if we can fix this. Okay, so this is at line 8. What happens at line 8? Something right here. What is happening right there that breaks? Okay, we can only concatenate string, not datetime.datetime. Okay, so what this means, this stamp object, remember what we saw earlier, is that is not a string by default. If we do Python 3 and then we just do like that from datetime import datetime, if we try to just call datetime.now like we do on line 7, well, that's going to return this datetime.datetime object, datetime.datetime, and we cannot concatenate datetime.datetimes to strings. This is the reason that we said that we had to first convert that thing to a string. Because if we don't, and we just try to do it as is, so like what is the type of that? That's a date time. That's not a string. We can't just do string plus that thing. Easy fix. Let's wrap this thing inside of a string and see what happens. Try that code one more time. Python 3 rps.py. This looks much better. So let's see, does that have everything? Yep, we have 2025. Let's compare these two things side by side. Okay, 2025, trying in the REPL, 2025, trying in the REPL. This looks really close. I'm feeling pretty confident. Let's take out our exit statement, and see whether or not our tests are passing at the moment. Okay, so we're pretty confident in this. Let's run the tests to see whether we're correct. Okay, Control-Shift-V to paste. Ooh, interesting. Okay, we got some errors. Okay, let's go kind of step by step on these ones. So, actually, sorry, it looks like terminal did something weird there. Okay, cool. So assertion error. Testing that thing not found. This one's a little bit tricky to parse, but this one right here, false is not true. The log messages should end with a new line. Ooh, okay, so \n. Oh, okay, so there's something a little bit subtle that I missed. If I do, so let's bring like one of these back in. So one of these things back into this, and then I'll add that exit statement back in. Okay, so what happens if I just do python3 rps.py? I should print out something that was working. Let's look really closely. Okay, so there's an invisible character right there and right there. Both of those are new line characters because, okay, technically there's a small problem in this explanation because technically the character is right there. There's a \n in both of those places. But the result of that is that it adds the extra new line on the next line after that. Okay, so there's one other thing I forgot. I also have to add the \n, or the /n, in order to add a invisible new line character to the end of this. Now if I do rps.py, it's adding that extra new line, which is jumping back right there. Now let's see if we remove some of this stuff, python3 rps.py. That still looks okay. Python3 test rps.py, and I want to do the log message tests. Okay, 8 tests, all 8 passed. Let's do a little bit of code cleanup. Cool. So, I'll change a couple of these things because there is a slightly easier way that maybe I could see to do this now that we've ended up with this more complex solution. Instead of just doing like this whole stamp and then like building up this log message with string concatenation, I tend to prefer using f strings if I can. So let's do an f string where we have a left square bracket, right square bracket, datetime.now, because we can call methods inside of these, a space, 2 hyphens, the message, and then the new line at the end. I'm going to comment these things out for a moment just to prove that this does exactly the same thing. Up arrow, run the tests again. All of them still pass. I like this version a tiny bit better just because I think it's, well, just certainly much more concise. Let's add a little bit of spacing to kind of wrap out our notes. Let's do get status. Oops, try again. Get status. Add that to our staging area because our last couple sections are add, commit, and push changes when we have working code. Okay, get add RPS, get status, get commit-m because it's in our staging area, add make log message. Cool. I'm going to push this up to GitHub as well. Git push. Okay, what's next? Okay, how do we read and write to files? Okay, so we want to eventually create some kind of logging that will record everything as everything that we ask it to. So we probably should be pretty comfortable with this whole idea of like opening and writing to files. Okay, let's see if we can answer a couple of these questions first. So yeah, experiment with these things. I personally like creating a new file called sketching.py. Yeah, okay, let's try this out. So a second ago I said that, you know, if you throw a, oops, try that again. If you throw an exit right here, it effectively divides your program into 2 pieces. So there's all of this up here that we could still add print statements here, and nothing we do that below this matters, which can be super useful when we're debugging stuff. This question, though, is really asking, like, how do these lines of code work? So there's nothing that says that we have to work in rps.py. We could just create a new file called sketching.py, which will then be available to us, and we could try writing some code inside of here. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. So, like, what would happen if we ran sketching.py now? Well, it has an open statement right here and an open statement right here. This one is in read mode. This one's in write mode. I think this one's going to crash based on the things that we saw back here inside of the primer chapter. So ls, control L, python3, sketching.py, enter. Yeah, okay, so what happened? Never fear, the error messages are here. Line 1, okay, so we tried to open name of file in read mode, but there is no file inside of here that's just called like name-of file. So this won't really make sense unless we give it the literal name of a file inside of here. to avoid some kind of self-referential insanity, maybe I'll add a new file called like demo.txt right here. I'll put just like hello world inside of this, save it up, close it out. And what if we replace name of the file with the literal demo.txt? Okay, so let me do that again in slow motion. Control Z, name a file, I selected that. I did Control D. Notice I now have two cursors flashing right here. Demo.txt is the name of the file. Escape a couple times to get back to just a single cursor. Okay, so step one, I'm going to read this into data, and then I'm going to print out the data, and then I'm going to do some other stuff. Let's ignore this stuff for just a moment and think about just what the writing would do. Okay, so sketching.py, sure enough, it's going to read the contents of demo.txt into a variable. Well, that file literally just contained that file literally just contained hello world, so therefore hello world was printed out. Makes perfect sense. What happens if we do like demo.txt, but after we read it, we also call fh.write in write mode? Whatever you want. Okay, so right now, this just has hello world inside of it. What happens? Control L, Python 3, sketching.py. I'm gonna keep my eyes on this word, hello world, for a moment. Let's hit enter. 3, 2, 1. Ooh. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, well, a second ago it said hello world, but after I wrote some new text to it, hello world exclamation point got deleted and instead replaced with the result that we just wrote to it. I bet that's about to be really important. Okay, what are some of the other questions we want to answer right here? Okay, so what happens if you read a file multiple times? Well, we basically demonstrated that. You can read files as many times as you want, but ooh, if we change something, it changes the result. What happens if you write to a file multiple times? We didn't answer this one yet. We did answer this one, it just crashes. And what happens if you try to write to a file that doesn't exist? Okay, we did answer this, it crashes. This is fine. We don't know about this one yet, and we don't know about this one yet. Okay, so what happens if you write to a file multiple times? Okay, so let's take the read step out. Okay, so what happens if we write multiple times? Well, we can find out. Interesting. So I'm running this sketching.py over and over and over again, and it doesn't look like the results are actually changing, which isn't quite what I eventually want to deal with when I have a log file. I think we're getting really close to the next question. So let's wrap this point up. So writing to a file multiple times is a little bit odd. If I try to write to a file that doesn't exist, let's just do like demo2.txt. So I'm writing to a file. There is no file inside of here called demo2.txt. What happens if I do Python 3 sketching.py? Oh, yep, did you see it? In slow motion, it created a new file called demo.txt. Okay. Reading a file that doesn't exist is problematic. Writing to a file that doesn't exist will simply create the new file. I think we know sort of all the pieces that we want in order to get to the next step. Okay, so I'm going to clean up my environment very slightly. I don't need this whole demo thing, so don't get rid of the demo.txt and demo2.txt. I will hold on to this sketching thing for a while because I want to try some more stuff inside of this next idea. Okay, so implement the actual log function. So we now have a function that does create the log messages, but let's use the make log message definition to implement this actual log function. And here's the thing, I'm going to do this inside of the sketching.py. Because all of this can be independent from our rps.py that we're also doing some other stuff. So maybe I'll just try implementing some ideas inside of here and then eventually transfer it back to my implementation inside of rps.py. Okay, so we want to create a new function called log. Okay, let's reason about what this will do. This takes a message, it takes the name of a log file, which has a default argument, so a default argument of game status.log. Okay, so what we want to do is, instead of just having a file, so maybe I'll bring one of those back up, demo.txt, demo.txt. So instead of just having this file where every time we call like, with open, and then demo.txt in write mode as fh.write, something, and a new line after it. We want this to be such that the first time we would see something, and if we call this log function, if we call this multiple times, then the result would be that we see something, then something, then something, then something, and every single time we call this function, it adds another line to demo.txt. Let's see if we can come up with a behavior that does something like that. So don't need demo.txt. How might I start approaching this? Okay, so when we call this function, the message gets written to the log file, by default game-status.log, and each time we should add an additional message to the end of the log file. So therefore, if we call log, let's bring that in. So if we call log twice, then the first time we should see something like this in the log file. But if we call it a second time, then we will have the original ones and some new ones at the end. Okay, hints as well. We'll probably need to handle a case where the log file does not exist. You might need to do a remove at some point, or right-click. Python's OS standard library also has an os.path.isFile that answers true if it does exist and false otherwise. Okay, so like import OS, if the README does exist, we return true. If this file does not exist, we return false. Okay, I think we have enough information here that we can put together part of we can work toward an implementation here. Okay, so let's bring in a couple of these ideas. So we saw this whole thing about like writing to files. Writing to files is probably an okay place to start. So let's first use our variables. So we have a message and we have a log file. And notice that both of these have like this very muted red color on my screen, which means that these variables aren't getting used. In fact, if I hover over, it literally tells me that according to Pylance, log file is a variable that never gets used. So this is an easy place to start. The log file needs to be inside of here because we want to open the parameter that's defined right there. And then the message probably just needs to be actually written out like that. Okay. Maybe I'll emphasize the fact that the message should be inside of this because we do need to end that with a new line in order to add the extra line at the end. Write is not quite like print statements where that new line gets added for us automatically. Okay, so right now we're going to call fh.write, and I think we're going to write to game-status.log, which should have the effect of creating one out here for us when we run sketching.py. 3, 2, 1, yes, so we have a log file, but it only contains the second message because the first message was overwritten. Interesting. Okay, so here's the problem. Let's see. How do we first get everything inside of the file and then add something else after it? How do we do that? Well, here's a thought. We can just read the file. We can just read from the file. So what if we first open up the log file in read mode? So notice, look very closely, read mode first, then write mode as another file handler. And what if we say like old content equals fh.read? So what's going to happen if we run this code now? So we have an old content, and let's just maybe print it out for a moment. Print out old content. Okay, so let's reason about the state as this runs. So the first time we call log, we are going to open the game status, print out what it contains, and then write something into it. And then we're going to do it a second time, but with a second message. Okay, so notice the game status currently says second message inside of this. what happens when we run the code? Let's ask, and let's find out. Python 3, sketching. Interesting. Okay, so here's what happened. We see second message, which game status originally contained second message. And then, but then we replaced it. So we replaced it with first message, which is why we see first message. But then we called the write and we wrote second message, which means that we ended up showing second message. Maybe we can enter this with, or maybe we can emphasize this if we start game status at 0 and then we call first then second. I think what we will see is we will print out 0 and then first message, but then the final result will be that we see second message right here. Let's see if that's the case. So Control L, Python 3, sketching, 0, then first, and then the very last thing is that the second message is put inside of the log file. Okay, I think we're really close. So the next thing we can do is that instead of printing old content down here, what if we could just print it? What if we could just print it to the log file instead? Okay, well, let's take out the print statement. Okay, and that shows that we're not using old content, but we have it stored in a variable. We could just call fh.write with old content. What would this do? Let's repeat that where we go back to 0 right here, which means that we should first do first, then second. Let's see what happens when we run sketching now. So 0, then first, then second. And if we run this multiple times, it's going to, the effect is that every time we call this log message, so it's adding first and second each successive time that we call this stuff. Cool. Okay, I think we're super close. We are super close to this. Is there anything else that we were hinting at? So I probably don't need this comment right here. Is there any other hints? Okay, you might need to handle the case where the log file does or does not exist. Hint. What happens when we remove gamestatus.log? Okay, good question. What does happen when we remove the log file? So we just showed that everything works perfectly when gamestatus.log exists, but what happens if it doesn't exist? Well, we said earlier that trying to read from a file that doesn't exist has some really weird effects. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to remove gamestatus.log. What happens if we do sketching.py now? No such file or directory, no such thing as gamestatus.log. Okay, so here's the next idea. What do we do? What do we do if the file does not exist? What do we do if the file does not exist? Well, we can't read from a file that doesn't exist. And, well, if the file doesn't exist, then there kind of isn't any old content. Well, I think there's a few ways to think about this one. One of the ones I want to try is that if the file doesn't exist, well, if the file doesn't exist, it's kind of like there's an empty string. So there is no previous data that we have to worry about. So we could think of there as being two situations. There is either this situation where the file doesn't exist, and, okay, oh, wait, two situations. What does that sound like? So if, okay, so basically, if it does exist, do something. Otherwise, do something else involving the empty string, like that. What does that sound like? That sounds like an if statement. So let's say something like if os.path.isFile. Yeah, so if the log file exists, if log file, do something, otherwise do something else. Okay, well, we just said that if it does exist, we probably want to load up the old content with the previous stuff that it contained. So let's Control X, paste that in here, adjust our adjust our formatting. Okay, so if it does exist, we want to open it. Otherwise, oh, okay, well, old content needs to exist. But if there was no file previously, then old content could simply be empty string. Old content would simply be empty string. I think this actually might work now. Let's try it out. So Python 3 sketching.py. There is no file called gamestatus.log right here. I'm really hoping that the first time we run this, it's going to not run this one, initialize old content as an empty string, open up the log file in write mode, write an empty string the first time, and then write whatever message we originally passed into this log function. Let's see if that's the case. Try it out. So gamestatus.log, drop it over here. Sure enough, first message, then second. And if we run this multiple times, each of our log messages in sequence just gets put at the very end. I could even remove gamestatus.log, so it no longer exists. I could do Python 3 sketching. It is recreated with all of our messages inside of it. I'm feeling pretty confident in this. So what do? Well, we've written this log function with a local version of this make log message. So all we should have to do is just take this definition, bring it back into our rps.py, and then put it inside of it. Okay, yep, and then we get squigglies saying that os.path doesn't exist. Well, that's because we imported it in one location, but not in the other. Easy fix. Let's try that one final time. I'm feeling really confident. In fact, maybe we can jump straight into the tests. So logging tests. Let's try these out. Control-Shift-V. Okay, moment of truth. Oh no. Okay. What did I forget? Oh, okay. Well, hold on. So 2025 was not found in the message. Log messages should start with a left square bracket and a year like 2025. I forgot something very, very easy. So notice back over here, I never used the definition of make log message inside the definition of my log function. Okay, so probably what I want to do is instead of just shoving the message into the log file and writing it out, I probably just need to call it with this make log message. So make log message with message, and I'm going to call this and then write this into the file. Let's try this out inside of sketching.py again and see if I got it right this time. Sketching.py, game status, and there we go. There's those timestamps and that punctuation that we were expecting. Let's remove gamestatus.log just to prove that all of this stuff works one more time. So Python 3 sketching, that's going to create gamestatus.log. If I run this 1, 2, 3, 4 more times, now it looks like it's okay. Let's transfer that back. So I'm just going to copy this entire function that I was working on, drop it right there. Now let's see what happens if I do Python 3. Let's see if I can have that back in my history. Silly me, I don't. That thing was called logging tests, so let's bring that back in. Ran 3 tests, looks great. Okay, that one was a little bit more involved because there were these corner cases that we had to start dealing with. I wonder if that's a hint of all the fun stuff that we have to come. Okay, so gamestatus.log contains all of this stuff inside of it. Let's see. I don't think I really need this sketching.py anymore. So I'm just going to remove everything and in fact close it out and remove sketching.py. If I need it in the future, I can recreate it. What's the last step? Okay, so we're pretty confident in this. We ran logging tests, maybe one more time just to prove it to ourselves. Let's add and commit and push our changes once our code is working. So Python 3, git add, git status, git add rps.py, show that it's in our staging area, git commit-m, add log function. Awesome. Git push. Okay, what's the next step? Okay, I think we might actually, so give ourselves a check mark for the last part, obviously, but I think there's a portion that I may have left out from here. What happens if we run all of the tests at the moment for test.rps.py? Test.rps.py. Everything's passing. So I think our code, if we look back on GitHub and refresh the page, everything changes from a red to a green, indicating that things are looking like they're in an okay state. Let's move on to step 6 then. So actually practice setting some log points and seeing like what kind of data that we can start collecting about our program. Okay, so first things first, let's just start by logging some data as it runs. Let's add some log messages to the beginning and end of our main function, similar to this. Okay, well that one's pretty straightforward to do. Let's just go back to our rps.py, give ourselves a little bit of space so we can see. Go down to main, and then this one should be pretty straightforward because we can just add one to the top right here and maybe something like, let's see, start main. Let's do start main. That's an okay message. Do the exact same thing down here with where we end the main function. Oops. Where we end the main function. And then Python 3 rps.py. Ooh, let's look at game status side by side. So game status. Okay, so we started main. We are currently inside of the execution of the program. And if I choose all caps rocker, try again, rock, there we go. So we started main, then we ended main. I'm going to delete all my logs just to get us back to this blank slate one more time, so I can emphasize that one more time. Control L, I do Python 3 to start rps.py. It starts up main. We are now inside. We are inside of the program somewhere, and we have not reached the end goal yet. Let me choose scissors. We exit main, and we end main, and return back here. Okay, that one was pretty straightforward. Okay, so play a few rounds of RPS. Make sure that our log file is updating each time. Very reasonable thing to do right there. Let's do rock, do it again, paper and rock and scissors. Okay, yeah, definitely looks like this thing is updating every time. I'm feeling pretty confident in this. Git status, yep, git add rps.py, git commit-m, add log to main function. Cool. Let's see, log error. Oh, okay, so step 7, log errors when a typo occurs. One of the things that may be pretty useful for us to keep track of is like when errors actually do occur. So in addition to printing out the feedback to the user, let's also keep track of that inside of our log files. So add a log step in the getHumanChoice function, adjusting the print step so the message is printed, and also added to the logs. Okay, so let's find the getHumanChoice. Okay, Okay, so the error message is printed right here. Oops. Got a little ahead of myself on that one. Okay, so we print out an error message right here, but the idea is that we have a print statement that should go to the terminal or the apps or the console, but then we also want something to go right here. Okay, so maybe instead of just having all of this stuff inside of a print statement, let's take this stuff out and maybe put it inside of a variable first. So error message equals this thing. And then we could just print out that error message that we stored inside the variable. But we could also call log with the error message in order to keep track of this exact same thing and put it inside of there. So this first print statement is just going to go right there. The log message is going to go right there. Let's see if that happens. Into the terminal, Python 3, test, rps.py. Okay, and let's intentionally make a typo. So scissors. Yeah, unknown scissors. Try again. Yeah, okay. Let's make that a little bit wider so it's easier to see all of our error messages. Scissors. Yeah, that's not scissors. Scissors. That's not scissors. Scissors. Perfect. Okay. Our messages get logged each time we actually, each time we encounter an error inside of there. Cool. Let's do git status, confirm that, yep, we do have some stuff. Is there anything else we want to do? Yep. We checked already that our code is behaving as expected. It is producing results very, very similar to the requirement. So let's add, commit, and push. Git add rps.py, git status, git commit-m. Let's see, add error, no. let's say something like log error messages on typos. Cool. I'll go ahead and push that one up. Okay, final idea. Record game data in the logs. Yeah, so final idea. Let's log the data for computer choices, human choices, and the final result. Basically, whether it was a human win, a computer win, or a tie. Very last idea. So another log call inside of the main, recording the choice made by the human and computer and whether the match ended in one of these. Okay, so what we want to show is something like this thing that says status, then a space, then rock, scissors, and human. It's a little bit vague what the order of these things are, but let's say computer choice would be that. The computer choice would be that. The human choice would be, oh, well, that's not right. I wonder if there's about to be a better way that maybe we want to record some data. Think on that for next time. Okay, so human did rock, so it's actually backwards. Human chose rock, the computer chose scissors, and the final result was that this was a human victory. So we want to go human, then computer, then final result. Let's see if we can transfer that into our main. So computer, human, winner, but we want to do something like human, computer, winner. Okay, so let's see. So let's build up some kind of message again. So I'll just call this a message for now and say that's an F string. And we want that to have the word status, followed by a space, followed by some other stuff. I'll just copy this whole thing for a second and fill in the blanks where it's necessary. Okay, so this first thing we said was going to be the human, because rock crushes scissors. So that's going to be the human. The computer choice is going to be this thing in the middle, and the winner is simply going to be whatever remains. So that's the message. Let's just log it. We can do it separately by just logging the message right there, but once we have that, maybe we might as well just see that we could just do log exactly like that as well. Let's run this a couple more times. And let's see, anything else I want to do? Let me go ahead and remove a couple of these game status things. So I will remove game status just to get us back into a clear blank slate. Let's do Python 3 rps.py. Open up game status one more time just to show that everything is working as expected. Okay, so final moment. We start main. Let's play rock. That's not right. Scissors, pepper, paper. There we go. Okay, so unknown the first time. Maybe we'll just do this one and just focus on the log file for the last part. Okay, so Python 3 rps.py. Let's do a rock. Okay. Computer 1, let's do paper, tie, paper, computer, pepper, paper. There we go. Okay. Rock, one more time just for fun. Great. Okay, so we have a game status that is all recorded inside the log, and we have these different windows now that we can use to explore our program as it runs. Let's do any final checks. So check code and status on GitHub. We should have made 6 commits today. Are these actually present? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's make sure that I add commit and push before I actually do this. So git status, git add rps.py, git commit-m, add, or let's see, log game status in main. Cool, git push. Okay. We should be back into a working tree clean slate. Yep, that's good. Close out of this. Maybe analyze our program one more time, see if there's anything else we could clean up. I'm pretty happy with this. I'll mention something about this log thing at the end right here. Okay, so check code and status checks on GitHub. I did this just a second ago, but let's just confirm that, yep, we logged status in the main. I'm currently at about 15 commits right now. If I scroll back a little bit, okay, yeah, so how many do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, so these are the 6 total commits that I was hoping to make during this work session. So give myself a little check mark next to this. Does test rps.py match the one on our computer? This is probably an okay thing to check too. So if I go back just to the base, I see that I have a test RPS right here. that it says it was updated about 45 minutes ago. So if I click this now, and if I look at test RPS, there's not really a right or wrong way to do this, but maybe if you look at the top like 5 lines of code, you'd see that these are exactly the same as the 5 lines of code I have down here. And if I scroll down to the very bottom, I have about 232 lines of code inside of here. If I scroll to the bottom on GitHub, 231, 231, 232. Okay, yeah, so ignore that 232 because 231s are the same. Okay, so it looks like what we have out here on GitHub is exactly the same as what we have on our personal machine. Does that thing work? Really, all of these things are just to force us to think about, like, does all of our stuff that was on our personal machine get synced back up to here? It's good to double check these things. And did all the tests pass? Yes, we said a second ago that we had that little green check mark symbol, 3, 2, 1, that was telling us that everything looked good. Okay, tidy up our Turk's workspace and close out for today. Maybe look through my code one last time. Anything you can make better? Anything that needs a comment or a to-do note? Maybe run the tests one more time just to show that everything is looking okay. Sure, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. Python 3 RPS. Nope. Let's do Python 3 test RPS. Great. That's okay. Okay. Last thing I do want to do, so maybe I will tidy up a little bit. There is one thing that I think I should mention about this RPS and this kind of really gross looking log function that we wrote. So this idea that we did today, this idea of we want to like write to the end, so end of the file, really this is like such a key thing that computers are useful for, that there is actually a way worth mentioning in this situation. Part of the reason that I put this off though is that this will not work for everything. So it's nice to know that you can do this in certain settings, but there's this other concept of opening a file in A mode or append mode, where, well, maybe I'll just demonstrate it and you can see what the results look like and decide whether you want to kind of read more about this on your own time. So instead of opening this file in read mode or write mode, there's a bunch of other options that we could actually do. So if I open up log file in A mode, where the A, and yeah, there's a lot of options inside of Python, where the A stands for append. For text files at least, this is the idea that we jump to the end of the file and continue writing from the end onward. So fix that a little bit. If I open this as FH, then I could actually just get away with this. Let's reason about this real quick, because I don't need any of this stuff anymore. Yeah, that's much simpler looking, isn't it? So we just append to the end of the log file that we open, and what do we write? Well, we just write the most recent log message. If this works, we don't have to worry about like all of that other stuff. In fact, we may not even have to worry about like this game status. So maybe I'll put that on my clipboard, remove game status for a second, Python 3 test rps.py, and everything still works. Okay, so it didn't recreate it though, because if I do Python 3 RPS and rock, that's where we actually get the game status back, and it shows all the lines that we expected it to. Okay, so I hope this kind of showed you that there's these other ways that we can solve these problems. In fact, I think this one was append mode. Do I have it inside of here? No, I don't. I thought it was in here. Yeah, okay, so implementing the log function. I think I did mention this as an alternate solution because, okay, writing to the end of a file is such a common problem that most operating systems and programming languages actually have a dedicated way to get to this idea. So in Python, it just looks like this. But okay, maybe I will stick with that one. So let's do git status, get out rps.py, git commit -m, switch log into using append mode. There are actually like some efficiency reasons for why you would do this as well, but this is not a class where we're worrying about the efficiency of the programs we write. More on that later. Cool. And that also meant that we don't need the OS anymore, so let's do get add rps.py, git commit -m, remove unused OS import. Git push one more time. Git status, working tree clean, nothing to commit. Okay, so very last step, we want to tidy up our workspace and close out for the day. Yeah, let's do it. So everyone, I hope this has been fun. If you have any questions, as usual, let me know on Discord, and I will see you in class and see you around.